Welcome back to the seventh grade mustache. On today's episode, we're speaking about the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, often referred to as the right to bear arms, is one of 10 amendments that form the Bill of Rights. So, the purpose of this episode is to speak about the Second Amendment and how it relates to people of color. More importantly, how it affects us today. Because the Second Amendment, many people don't really dig into how it affects you. And it's meant as a stopgap to prevent tyranny. And I really want to talk about more in particular people of color and their view of that, or their right to bear arms. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, and the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the Second Amendment. So if you look at the formation of this country with enslaved Africans being brought here by force, being forced to work, escaping, and some being freed through war or other means, you have a almost hidden history of black people carrying weapons to protect themselves and their family. And I think in the current climate, there is a popular belief that blacks should not keep guns. And these are other blacks that are thinking that guns aren't necessary to keep yourself safe, which is ridiculous. It was the War of 1814 where President James Madison fought off British troops, and the British troops attacked the president, attacked the Capitol, and it is with the helps of blacks that he was able to fight them back. And then these blacks then left and went to Trinidad and Tobago. But I want to jump back from there further back into past to the Bacon Rebellion. And Duct Tape, I believe you got something to say about that.
Bacon Rebellion, this goes back to 1676. This is before America was a country as we know it. You have the Bacon Rebellion, which basically, like I said, you heard Dick Gregory mention it before. Well, this is what he was talking about. You have indentured servants, white and black. So this is in Virginia. Like I said, 1675 to 1676. You have these indentured servants, white folks, who get tired of being treated like this. They're like, look, we came over here to be slaves. We had no problem. We were going to do our 7 years, and then we start doing other things. But what happened is you're treating us like shit. You guys you're treating us. This is way worse than anything we ever expected. And so these white folks decide to rise up. These slaves rose up against their masters and beat the shit out of them. It was a colonial government. It was William Berkeley was in charge at the time. So he makes a deal with the white slaves. He said, hey, here's what you do. You finish your servitude. You finish your 7 years or whatever. And when you're done, we'll give you land, guns, and gunpowder. These are the white slaves. This is the first time people have ever really been called white that we know of. This is when you have the misogyny laws, where if you're a black man and you marry a white woman, the white woman becomes a slave. If you're a black woman and you marry a white man, you don't become a slave, but you're not free either. And so this distinction comes to light in the 1670 areas. And what happens is that they make a deal with the white slaves. Like, look, if you help us keep the niggas in line, we will give you land, guns, and gunpowder. That way, and that was the first time, like, it was ever, as we know it, gun laws in this country started somewhere in that area where black slaves were not allowed to have guns. White slaves, when their indentured servitude was up, they were allowed to have guns, gunpowder, and land, and that was to help maintain black folks. So the very first gun laws in this country were 1600s for black slaves. Fast forward to the end of slavery. Again, you were not allowed to have guns. If you were a former slave, they didn't want you having guns. They would make these rules, and it was different. This one wasn't quite national. This is more different in every state. And then The next time there was real gun control that we know about, fast forward to the 60s, and this is the Black Panther Party, Ronald Reagan, California. They start doing gun laws there, and they try to have that go to the rest of the country. They didn't want niggas having guns. So that's when you hear these comments that Reagan was making about, okay, no, you don't need more than a shotgun and things like that. The reason he was saying those things, he's a gun guy, was because of the Black Panther Party. That changed everybody's outlook. When you saw black folks actually using the second, and this is something that we covered in another podcast, you can't have the First Amendment. You can't have the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of congregation, blah, blah, blah. You can't have all those without the second. The second is the stopgap that Roscoe was referring to. The second is the one that makes all the other ones work. Because as soon as you say something, as soon as you do something that these other people, these forces, the government, these people in charge don't like, who's to stop them from stopping you? So the Second Amendment is there so that you can protect your other rights.
That's right.
And this is where it gets really
No. Let me stop you right there. The second is there so that not only can you protect your rights, so that others respect your rights.
Your rights.
Because they respect your gangster, because they know that shit can go sideways if they violate.
All it takes is 1 second for things to get out of hand. And the reason they respect you is not because they respect you. They respect you because they don't want their life taken. They don't want to get shot. They don't want to, just to send police in, when they talk about not having a warrant. How do you think they enforce that? Because police ain't going to go in there if they know you're armed. But now, if you ain't got no weapons, the police will come in there, violate your rights. And there's a history of this. And like I said, the Second Amendment is, who's the police before the police get there? You are. Or what do you do when you can't trust the police? And I think that
Okay. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I said, here's what's really frustrating to me. People love to equate this whole LBG thing to black folks' experience in America. And one of the things that I deal with on a personal level, black folks deal with a lot, is that it's that struggle of the LBGT community. I don't understand, but the struggle of women is not addressed enough. The struggle of women is much more closer to what's being done with black people in America. Women have been subjugated. Women have been slaves. Women have always been treated like second-class citizens. And it's very difficult to explain that to women because when you've been treated this way for so long, and so I don't understand if women understood, because most of the people that ask for gun control are women, or you're a lady whose son got killed because he was in a gang, or you're a parent. So it's hard. I'm like, well, why would women want gun control? It's because they've already been brainwashed to think that this is what's best for them. We don't need weapons. Yes, you do. If every woman in America had a weapon, the numbers of rapes, the numbers of domestic violence, these numbers would go down, and nobody wants to address that because it's been proven that in most areas, when you have a situation where they have a new reciprocity law, you hear that term a lot. Reciprocity is when they have a concealed carry law, or there's a new law in the books where people can carry. The crime rate goes down by 4 and 5%. What would happen if the biggest minority in this country, which are women, were all armed? You wouldn't see the same things because then all of a sudden they are now treated as equals because people are afraid of what they can do. Men are afraid. And so I think there's a better, I don't really think people exercise the similarities between women and black people's experience in America.
Okay, that's a good point for me to say that in 1831, a black man named Nat Turner, along with some very determined black folks, caught wreck in Virginia. And they were armed. But you see, they weren't turned the other cheek. No.
Nope.
What they were doing is they were turning their anger into directed violence on those that perpetrated violence on them.
It was about action.
So, and they did take action. But people think, this whole pacifistic type of way of life is just all the way through Negro history. And that's not true because Ida B. Wells promoted rifle ownership. Yeah. She said directly that rifle ownership will reduce the amount of lynchings of black people across America. W.E.B. Du Bois also promoted rifle ownership to prevent lynchings and self-protection and allow self-protection and protect yourself from the violence of evil whites.
Yeah,
But
you can't find any more articles about it, but back in the day, there were a bunch of articles about how the NRA helped black folks protect themselves. This is like in the 50s and 60s. I can't. They used to be able to see articles. I can't find them anymore. So I don't know if either the articles weren't true, or if they're articles that just been whitewashed where you can't find them anymore. But you hear about. We told the story before in the past, but Condoleezza Rice talks about when she was a kid that her grandfather and all the preachers from that community sat there and protected those black towns from the Klan. See, the reason you don't hear those stories about the Klan losing is because the Klan only messed with people that didn't have guns. So, like in her town, her grandfather and all the preachers got in pickup trucks, and it's like 4 or 5 pickup trucks, and they blocked one end of the town, and they got 4 or 5 pickup trucks with shotguns and guns and rifles blocked the other end of the town. So when the Klan showed up, they saw, oh, these brothers are armed. We'll go to the next town. Again, like I said, we've revisited this in the past. The other one is that there are 2 Black Panthers. Okay, you have the Black Panther Party, which is the one in Oakland, but you also have the Black Panthers, which were vets that came back from the Korean Second World War, and they were the ones that protected King. You have the Deacons for Defense. They protected King. See, people don't understand. The reason Martin Luther King was able to march was because there were black folks with guns there keeping this element in line. Now, fast forward to today, you don't hear those stories anymore. But when you talk to your grandparents and your great-grandparents, they break it down like, nah, King had an entourage. That's why when King was up in Illinois, that's where he got beat up at, because in Cicero, Illinois, they thought because it's the North, they don't need that. So you can't have one without the other. The whole idea that we don't need guns, and here's the thing that's popping up right now. You know, recently we just had the shootings down in Atlanta where some white guy goes on a rampage and kills some Asians. I think he killed 8 Asians. You can elaborate more. But when the word first came out, because it was Atlanta, the media assumed that it was black folks killing these Asians. So there was a big thing that popped up. Well, black on Asian hate and all this other stuff. We find out that as a white guy, they don't apologize to black people. All of a sudden, you got Asians boycotting and doing all this other stuff. Well, here's the point. You not once did you hear white folks say to the Asians what they say to the black people. The first thing, you don't see no Asian preachers coming out, turn the other cheek. You don't see that. You don't see, you didn't hear white folks say, what about Asian on Asian crime? No. See, the reason they say it about a black people is because black people in this country, our history has been subjugation, and they don't want you rising up. They don't treat the Asians the same way. Second, the reason that all these people are upset is because Asian groups were boycotting. Marching without boycotting does not work. So, like I said, let's get back to the point of the second. The point of the Second Amendment is to keep these other amendments available to you on an individual basis. When you're an individual, it's hard to sit here and say, I got freedom of speech when I can't shoot the person trying to take my freedoms away. So this is what we're trying to get black folks to understand. There is a roadmap to freedom in this country, and you're avoiding the most important stop, which is the Second Amendment. It's all these other groups. Like I said, when you talk about this, you know, the first thing they want you to say, oh, you shouldn't be hurting people. Well, people shouldn't be hurting me. They don't see you as a person, and that's why this shit is so important. That you're sovereign.
okay,
As a person on this
so
ground, you're sovereign.
the perception of gun ownership has changed within the past 3 years, including since the death of George Floyd. But we're going to park that for right now for just a second, because I want to take this moment to pay some respect to the brothers that was laying the groundwork for all of the United States. The word cowboy was a derogatory term that was used for the black men that worked as ranch hands and who had the shittiest, worst jobs. And by the 1870s and the 1880s, they comprised about 25% of 35,000 cowboys in the Old West. I'll say that again. 25% of 35,000 cowboys in the Old West were black men. That's right.
And half the cowboys were black and Mexican. And
No. That's cool. But right now we're talking about 25% of 35,000 cowboys in the West were black. So here is the thing. They faced discrimination and they were made to do the worst jobs, and they had to ride the roughest horses. They had to break the roughest horses. But because of that, they gained a reputation for being formidable horsemen. So here's the deal, though. There are before the blacks became cowboys, the dudes that worked on the ranches were just called ranch hands or cow handlers. They weren't called cowboys. So the term cowboy is derogatory towards black men. And so this has to be understood so you understand the context. The crazy part about it is in the Old West, they wouldn't even let brothers go to brothels. They were banned from brothels because they know they would come through slinging dick, laying it down. Yo, it'd be a hot mess. So they was like, no. You gotta keep all that up out of here. So the crazy part is like when you start to dig into the history of some of these brothers, and more particular the gunslingers. So we're talking about gun ownership. So you had these black men that were away from plantations and the oppression of the South, and they had guns on their hip to protect themselves from evil ass crackers. And some of these became gunfighters.
They're famous gunfighters. Yep.
That's right. There was one black man that was so good at handling a weapon, he became the first black U.S. Marshal. His name is Bass Reeves. This guy was the Lone Ranger because he was out there handling fools with a gun by his lonesome. And they based the Lone Ranger on him because he was such a badass.
He was a marshal, but the story, when you see the TV show, they talk about the Lone Ranger, the Lone Texas Ranger. That's why it's called the Lone Ranger. But no, this guy was the Lone Marshal. And when you find out Bass Reeves is real, when you find out that he used to be a slave, it's crazy that the TV show that we all grew up on in the 70s, which goes back longer than that, was based on a real character. That's the way I found out was in the Television History Museum. They actually have an exhibit dedicated to Bass Reeves, and it breaks down that this is who the Lone Ranger was based on. And we've talked about this in past podcasts, but this is something that, this is part of the history that nobody wants you to know because they want you to be passive. They want us arguing amongst ourselves about, hey, Martin Luther King was nonviolent. You should be nonviolent.
So there was a black cowboy named Jesse Stahl, and he was so fly at riding horses. His rodeo skills were unparalleled in the 1800s. That's how just ham he would go on these horses. But there was another cowboy named Nat Love, and Nat traveled the frontier and was actually cool with Billy the Kid at one point in time. So they're all throughout history. The only problem is they don't get promoted because of a Eurocentric narrative that wants to whitewash history and make you think that we were passive and we were under, suppression and oppressed and chains all the time until we were freed by the Civil War. No, don't fall for the okie doke. It didn't go down like that.
What it is that people act like black folks only began with slavery when we were already over here. When slavery is what they say, black dishistory. Slavery is not black history, and don't you forget it. The idea that, okay, all of a sudden we're relevant once we became slaves. No, we ran the planet. But our excerpts, our dopeness, like Nat Love, gangster. So many of these gunslingers, and the reason they avoid that is because they don't want to inspire you to beat people's ass. That's all this is about. I remember when under Trump, remember when they had that mass shooting in Nashville? White dude showed up at the Waffle House naked, shooting up people, and a black guy took the gun and beat his ass. You don't hear about those things. But since we've been in America and before this place was a country as we know it, we've been over here wrecking shop, teaching people how to act. And nobody wants to, they don't want to talk about that because if we get inspired and rise up, we'll take this country over. And that's what nobody wants.
So I want to see, listen, whenever we have a certain type of show, we always promote books you can read. Well, there's a book about Nat Love, this black cowboy, and it's called Nat Love. It's his autobiography. It's called Nat Love, African American Cowboy by Sarah Penn. Pick up this book and read it. It is thought-provoking. It really is. It draws in, it colors in the empty spaces in the Old West and it puts black faces in those empty spaces. And it kind of changes your perception of what you see. This guy he was born in 1854 and he died in 1921. So there's a lot to really learn and take in from his story, and I highly recommend that for a lot of people. So go and get that book and dig up some African American history and really, really, find some stuff you didn't know. You know what I mean? Like, just educate yourself.
Look, you have to educate yourself, because if you let your oppressor educate you, you won't learn who you are. You'll learn who they want you to be. You're learning a watered down version of your own self. And the fact that Love has an autobiography from 1907, the fact that he drank with Billy the Kid, the fact that everybody respected this guy, everybody feared this guy, feared him. That's a character. That is something that we don't let out there. Even when we talk about Bass Reeves, his nickname was the Invincible One, not because of his exploits as a sheriff. He was because of his rodeo skills and breaking horses and things. So when you find out this is what white folks call these black folks, wow, yeah, it's one of the dopest things that you'll understand, and that we were part of this culture. But when you watch these John Wayne movies, you don't see niggas, or you see him as a cook. Or when you realize that there were black Indians and that we were part of those tribes, all that's been whitewashed or Asian washed, if you will. So that's because by creating that, we won't fight. We won't be who we are. We won't be who we are naturally.
Right. So I want to talk about an event that happened in August of 1917, and it was in one of the last years of the First World War. Well, there were black soldiers that were in Houston, Texas, and they revolted over Jim Crow laws in Texas and shot up the fucking town. A lot of people don't talk about that because they don't fucking know about it. But that was another example of brothers that are fed up with chicken shit, bullshit, nonsense. And they said, you know what? Fine. Y'all want to fucking shoot? Let's shoot. And they fucking went to town and let these motherfuckers know what time it is. That's another one of the hidden gems in history. Did you know about that?
No, I didn't. Another thing that people don't, after the Civil War, cowboy was one of the few jobs you could have. If you didn't want to be a fucking elevator operator or a porter on the railroad or something like that, if you didn't want cowboy was one of those jobs that you could have where you didn't have people breathing over you. You were still subject to racism. That's what we're explaining. But that's one of the few jobs you could have where you could be a full adult. You didn't have to deal with a bunch of extra shit.
Right. But see, these were soldiers trained with weapons. So, but we also want to talk about people that came back from wars and continued to carry guns at home. These were soldiers that were in World War One. That, as we saw in that movie Rosewood, he came back with a black horse and a Colt 45 on his hip. Well, that is fiction, but it's based on facts of black GIs coming back to a hostile environment at home and having to protect themselves. They all didn't bow down and say, just and turn the other cheek. No, they just loaded the clips or loaded that wheel gun. But this happened after each war. You have these trained Negro veterans that come back and they actually promote protecting themselves, not themselves only, but their neighbors and their own people, their neighborhoods, everybody in the neighborhood, or they might be the protector of the block if shit goes down.
You go to war and you're having to fight for your country. Now all of a sudden you acquire skills, and those skills just don't stay on the battlefield. So you come back to civilian life, you ain't gonna take that shit no more. And the point we're trying to make, going back to the Revolutionary War, going back to the Civil War, then World War One, World War Two, Korea, Vietnam. You always hear about these black badasses coming back.
Okay, but check this out. So you talked about the Civil War. You talked about the Revolutionary War. There were blacks that were involved in the battle with Mexico. So here's the thing, though. You got to understand that during the Manifest Destiny land grab, the the idea was to suppress all people of color at that time so that those whites could grab that land for themselves and do with it as they will. And so, in doing so, that meant taking guns from any black person they came across that was willing to relinquish their weapon. And so, of course, you're going to come across some people that's like going to put some lead in you, trying to take theirs, and bring a threat to them and their family. But it did happen. There were whole black towns in the Midwest that were wiped out through violence, through white violence. These people came across the U.S., stealing this land from the red people, using the black people to take it, or to build it up from them. But this, you got to understand, this charter that they were given, right? This charter, there was an ideology with that, meaning that the blacks weren't deserving of that land that they were competing for. And so, in doing so, you also had, during this land grab time, you had these patrols for slavery that were created. And this was the first groups that were the police, so to speak. And these slave patrols were militia armies, militias that were created, that were paid. They were paid by,
Yes.
they were paid.
The first law enforcement is about land, is about property.
Mm-hmm.
You heard KRS-One say overseer officer. What he explained to you is the job of the overseer, who eventually became a police officer, was to keep black folks in line, was to keep your property in line. It was, and that's where law enforcement in this country comes from. So it's always had a hostile relationship with people of color because it was here to maintain property for white folks, and many times we were the property that they were referring to. So that part right there, and even if you what my brother's been trying to tell you guys about the history of guns in this country, when you look at these different cowboys about Bill Pickett, when you see these, when you Google black cowboys, you have cowboys up in Pocatello, Idaho. You got black cowboys in South Dakota. You got black, and you have to understand that our presence was here long before this country existed in its current form. So the reason that these people had the skills they had is because they were already here. Black folks were already here doing these things, and fighting against white people is nothing new. Only recently have we been told that, hey, the deepest thing we always talk about, how come Martin Luther King has a holiday but Malcolm X doesn't? Because Malcolm talked about getting a gun and shooting people. King talked about nonviolence. Now, we know there were other speeches by King, and that King actually changed his narrative towards the end of his life, and that's probably what got his ass killed. But you must understand that whole nonviolent thing is that they want that on us, so we are unable to fight back. We're so busy arguing whether we should fight back or not that we'll never see the oppressor putting their foot on your neck because you're too busy arguing over small facts. Well, we should do this. While you're doing that, you're being fucked. So recognize that as a black person, as a person of color in this country, however you identify yourself, as a Native American, African American, black, whatever you want to call yourself, that having a gun in the home is necessary to maintain your freedom because you got an element there designed to take your freedom away. So when you research your history and you find out that there's black cowboys and that they were ass kicking cowboys.
Oh yeah.
It changed a lot. It changed the narrative because the narrative is you go to work now, you be a good person.
But it emboldens you. It emboldens you. Like you feel good about your history. But that's exactly what they do not want.
Nope. It's necessary for you to suppress the people. You first have to have a assassination of character. You have to kill them in the media. You have to make them less than a person. Because then what this element is doing to you, white supremacy, American supremacy, whatever kind of supremacy you want to call it, for it to attack the people who are doing it must not see you as a person. Then you must not see yourself as a person, and then it's easy to subjugate you. That was my point earlier when I did the correlation between women's rights and black people's rights. You got most of these people asking for gun control are women, and they don't realize that they're doing themselves a disservice by doing that. The idea is that intelligent people don't need guns. That is a narrative that's put on you on purpose. So you be like, well, if I'm smart, I don't need a gun. Truth being told, that if you're smart, a gun is there to protect your right to be smart. And I get it. You might not want to use a gun, but you shouldn't take everybody else's rights away because how else are we going to protect ourselves from the oppressor? And sometimes the oppressor looks like you, so you got to recognize that shit.
Mm. See, okay, there are the laws that are on the books, and there is the interpretation of the law. The interpretation of the law, because
How it's applied to people, yes.
Philando Castile had a concealed carry permit,
Legal.
and he was murdered on Facebook Live in front of millions of people, and
People don't think about it.
the officer was told that he had a concealed carry license. Now, again, I will repeat this for the purpose of emphasis. It is there is a difference between the laws that are on the books and the interpretation of that law, because the interpretation of black people having the right to bear arms and having weapons permits are interpreted differently than it is for white people, because there's also the phenomenon of being black by having to appear to have a weapon. Ask the parents of Tamir Rice or the family of John Crawford or Robert Dentmund. They were shot because it looked like they were armed. One was a little boy in a park playing with a toy gun.
Yes. Here's it. When you start doing the research of the Philando Castile case, it only gets worse. I don't like I said I don't want to embellish, but there was some article I read about the whole case. He had been stopped by the Minnesota police like over 100 times, but he had never been arrested, or he had only been arrested once or twice. It's a crazy number, and the fact that he had a concealed carry, a legal concealed
They knew
carry.
it when they pulled him over.
Uh, uh, First things first, and let's talk about Nebraska. I live in Nebraska. When they run your license plates, it tells them that you have a concealed carry. So these officers, for whatever reason, whatever they decide to harass this guy, whatever that was about, nobody wants to explore that. But if you've been pulled over that many times and you don't get arrested, they're harassing. He must have known something about a cop. I don't know what the deal was. I don't want to embellish, but whatever reason, how can you be stopped over 100 times and never be arrested, never get in trouble? It's because one, to have a concealed carry, that means that you have a federal background check. All these liberals yelling background check, background check, background check. Let me explain something to you. For you to get a concealed carry in this country is actually you have an intense FBI background check, and so that means that man must have had nothing on his record for him to get that concealed carry. It's very intense. So whatever these cops, whatever the beef they had with this guy, they harassed him that much, and nobody wants to address that issue. Why were the cops stopping this guy? And even in this situation, he's saying, "I'm pulling up my wallet." Cop shoots him. You guys, you're not you can watch this video, but the point I'm trying to make is that cop, there was no reason for that cop to be scared. Cops have a built-in excuse. I was scared for my life, and they use that excuse to kill black folks every day. The cops have another built-in excuse. He's going for my weapon. When there are certain words, when I hear those words, I know what's happening next. So I just don't move. I'm like, hey, I'm not reaching for nothing, because I don't want to give you an excuse to murder me and get off. So you must understand that my experience with police, since I've had a concealed carry, has changed me, because once you got a concealed carry, cops talk to you differently. My interaction with, because they see me as an equal, they know that I have a weapon. They talk to you completely different. And part of the law that you learn in Nebraska is that in Nebraska, if you have a legal concealed carry and you're being stopped by police for official police business, you must tell the cops about it. So I tell them, like, hey, I got a concealed carry. Before you go any further, they'll ask, well, where is it? How many? I tell them, I got 3 guns on me right now. So black folks, we're always acting from a position of disadvantage. Having a gun puts you at either your equal or puts you at the advantage. We're so unfamiliar with being from the place of power that we relinquish our power so quickly ourselves. Stop relinquishing your power. Stop doing that. Having a gun is power, and I know people don't see it that way because they love to tell you that if you got a gun, you're a dummy. No, the person with the gun is not the dummy.
So, another thing to understand is that the fact that blacks did have guns and did carry them and open
History.
carry in certain situations caused problems later on. For example, Ronald Reagan was the governor of California when an armed group of black men stood on the steps of the Capitol building under the banner of the Black Panther Party. exercising their Second Amendment rights. Reagan then enacted the Mulford Act, restricting the public from openly carrying firearms in California because this so scared his chicken shit ass. Because make no mistake about it, he was truly racist. You know, he's painted as his hero and blah blah blah. That's white people telling you that because anybody that was alive in the '80s that would tell you he didn't give a shit about black people, and he was on caught on tape in the '70s mocking an African dance troupe visiting from another country, and he called them a bunch of monkeys. Look at them monkeys dancing. So, well, hold on, man. I'm making a point. So, hang on, Ren, hang on. So the thing is that by you brandishing your weapon in such a way, it will cause a knee-jerk reaction. So people wonder, okay, what is better, concealed carry or open carry? And you will get reactions if you are open carrying. Because here's the thing, if you have your concealed carry on you, it's concealed. Nobody knows you have a weapon. But once you start walking around with that gun, a rifle or a pistol, on your person out there in the open, you're going to get some reactions, right? And if your goal is to be reactionary, well, congratulations, because that's exactly what's going to happen. But if you are a student of the art of war and you understand stealth and you understand how to be subtle and you are well versed in history, you would know that it is more advantageous to be concealed with your weapon instead of to show your hand. Because then you got eyes on you, you got heat on you. Why do you want to have heat on you? You see what I mean? So that's my view on concealed versus open carry.
Look, people talk different when they got a gun on them, and it's a two-way street. The way that white folks talk to black folks, that's because they know they're at the advantage. But when you see black folks who conceal carry, when you see these former vets, my mom had a friend growing up. You know who he is. He carries concealed. And when you see a brother act like that, he's super intelligent. Went to Tuskegee, literally is a Tuskegee Airman. Was in the Air Force. Blah blah blah, pilot, and he talks when you see him talk, and you see interact with black folks and interact with white folks, and you realize, yeah, that man has an air about him. It's because he's carrying it, and he's not carrying because he's a bully. He's carrying because what I have to say matters. And that's how that First Amendment works. Like, I got freedom of speech. So I can argue with anybody in this room. I have a life experience. I have an education. I can say whatever I want. But that Second Amendment, I know he has a 38 on him. I know he has a revolver on him. I know he has a 44 Bulldog on him. And what that means is that can't nobody stop him from saying or doing what he has to do. And when you see these interactions, cops treat you different. There was a incident with one of your nephews a while ago, and your brother didn't know I was carrying. And so the first thing I told the cop got there, hey, I'm carrying concealed. Those cops all came to me and started, hey, well, what happened? They came to me, and he's like, and your brother asked me, what'd you tell him? I said, I tell him I got a gun on me. I got a concealed carry. When cops find out you got a concealed carry, they know for a fact that for you to have that concealed carry, that
you're not a knucklehead.
You went through rigorous. You went through a lot of shit to get that. They came to me like, hey, well, this. I'm like, this happened. I'm here defending my family. So you need to understand that shit. So that's a history that's been hidden from black folks on purpose. Media. What did Malcolm say? The media have you fearing the wrong person and hating the wrong person. That's what he's talking about. That media will create a narrative that everybody subscribes, even your own people will subscribe to. And, the famous scene of Malcolm, by any means necessary, we love that. But you got to understand is that once you give up that gun right, you have an opinion that no longer matters when you don't have the ability to defend it or the ability to express yourself properly. There's one more thing I want to stick out there is that black folks don't know how to fight. And when I say don't know how to fight, I'm not talking about physical fight. I'm talking about the rules of engagement. We talk about the incident in the Capitol in January where White folks know how to fight, and when I'm saying that, they know when they have a problem, they call their congressman, they write their governor, they write
Strategically,
their senator.
they know how to
Yes,
fight strategically.
yeah, yeah. They know who. Well, okay, you know how the whole thing.
They go
Karen,
through the
Karen.
proper channels. That's what they do. Instead of
Okay,
having an emotional reaction, they go through the proper channels.
exactly. Oh, that's some deep shit. So when you hear about Karen, that's the white woman showing up. I want to speak to your manager. White folks know how to do that shit on a bigger level. They know how to call the congressman. They know how to call their senator. They know how to write that person. You hear these old people all the time. How did they get all this shit they want? Now, you got lobbyists and you got money, and that's how it matters. It's where the money goes. So they'll sit there and say, I got to vote. No, they're like, you know what? What did the board say? They write a check for $2,500 and donate it to this person and get that person in office, and that person does what they want because they remember that you wrote a check to them. That's the shit I'm talking about. So what you must learn as a black person is how to fight. And when you don't know how to fight, you don't always get your point across. And next thing you know, you're rioting and marching. And again, we had this conversation last time. The reason the marches worked in the 50s and 60s is not because they were marching, it's because they were boycotting. You hear about the bus boycott. When they were boycotting and black folks weren't using buses, we all agreed to do that shit. And they came to us with, hey, what can we do to help you when you boycott shit? So the point of this, when you have a gun, we're not telling you to rob people. We're not telling you to act a fool. We're telling you that when the cops come on your property, you let them know, hey man, I'm armed. Why are you on my property? Do you have a warrant? Are you here? They talk to you different. And so black folks, we've always operated from a position of disadvantage, from a position of weakness. And when you do that, you don't you get accustomed to it. Excuse me. You become accustomed to acting that way. But when you come from a position of power, when you're equal to everybody else in the room, and you talk different, they even tell you when they talk to me, they're like, oh my God, you sound different. Like, what they're really saying is that I ain't afraid. That's what they're really saying. They don't want to say it like that. What kind of nigger are you? People actually assume that I'm a foreigner or some shit. Like, you must be from the island. Like, oh, motherfucker, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. You know what I'm saying? Like,
So check this out, man. Check this out. The conversation about gun violence and gun control shifts over time around black people. And if you survey a bunch of black people, 80% of them will tell you that gun violence is a serious problem. But the solution to that gun violence changes over time. With all the police violence during the Trump presidency, that perception changed a lot. In 1993, 74% of African Americans favored gun control. And now, later in 2018, 2021, they found that black people now have are registered gun owners. And so much so that the number of blacks with permits has grown by 140% since 2012. I'll say that again. The number of blacks with gun permits has grown by 140% since 2012.
the biggest demographic of people buying guns are single black women. Black women are buying up guns you wouldn't believe. But again, that's a narrative you don't know.
But the overall the growth in number of blacks with permits it's happening 20% faster than whites with permits. Yeah.
Yep. These numbers are
There
FBI
is
numbers.
something happening there. There is an awareness that is growing.
There's an awakening.
There is a self-reliance that is blossoming in the minds of black people.
This is why it's so important to educate yourself. And the reason educating yourself is complicated because what happens is people tend to gravitate towards certain things. But when you start educating yourself just in general, and you're reading all the stuff you can find, and you're finishing books, and you're reading articles, and you're reading essays about people who lived
But
back
check
then.
this out. I'll give you some more numbers. The NAAGA, the National African American Gun Association, established in 2015 in Chicago. They have members in Atlanta, Milwaukee, Phoenix, Baltimore, many large cities, in Texas as well. But they increased their membership by 58% from 2019 until 2020. Again,
The other one out there is the Huey P. Newton gun club. You have those popping up everywhere. There's a lot of black gun clubs, a lot of black family shooting clubs or shooting enthusiasts. And the thing back in the day, what they told us when me and you were kids is those black people, they're sellouts. They hit you with a sellout thing. They're crackers. They're Oreos. No, they're not. They're people that have done enough reading to know that the way that you exist is by demanding people to recognize you, respect. You can't come on my property. Another thing that I want to just mention real quick in passing is with the whole COVID thing. I think it flipped the script on a lot of people. A lot of people are. I'm trying to buy a house now. You can't find no houses. But what happened is there's a mass exodus of people leaving the city now and going out to the suburbs and buying land in the country because of this COVID shit. People are like, oh, I'd much rather be out there on my own, farther away from people. And I think it had I'm not saying it's real or not real. What I'm saying is I think COVID had an effect where people are like, you know what? I'm better off not in the city. If I can afford to have my own land, give me an acre or two, give me 6-7 acres, and let me put my house out there. I think that's what people are seeing now. I think we're going to see that a lot more.
yep, yep. A lot of awareness spreading and people realizing that, listen, police are not out here to help me. They're killing my children. They'll try to kill me. Fuck all that. I'm going to protect myself and my family. And
Here's something I wanted to bring up earlier. Me and you both are big Richard Pryor fans, and the reason that's so important is we grew up with Richard Pryor, but also we listened to the old Richard Pryor. And one of the things that he talked about, he makes fun of, Tricky Dick, makes fun of Richard Nixon. But when he talks about Ronald Reagan, he said, "I met that motherfucker. He looks like a dick." I could tell. I went to the White House to meet him. He didn't want me there. The reason that's so important is because he is describing his experience with the leader of this nation. And he's like, this motherfucker didn't like niggas. And he's telling you this. And Richard talks about having a 44 Magnum. He talks about having guns. He talks about Huey P. Newton. Whenever you see Richard in the Black Panther Party and he's talking about the 5% Nation, he's talking about Richard Pryor. My idols growing up were Malcolm X, Richard Pryor, and Muhammad Ali. And the reason Richard's so important is because he puts you in that stance where he was. And you're like, God damn. His point of view is so important, and him being a comic, he's able to say shit that nobody that polite society ain't able to say. We're not talking about fucking cock dick sucker motherfucker. We're not talking about it. He's talking about the black experience. He talks about the 5% Nation. He's like, yeah, y'all killed y'all savior. You killed your Jesus. That motherfucker came up and you put him on a cross. Why the hell would I if you killed the greatest one of y'all? Why would I speak up? Because you're gonna kill my ass. So. The reason these experiences are so important is because it's diverse, but when you have the Second Amendment, you're able to put your experience out there. All these people are struggling. We're struggling to be heard. Not if you got a gun, you ain't. Because the person with the gun, his or her opinion is valued by other people. They may not agree with you. Like, hey man, I don't agree with what you think. But that gun makes sure shit validates you. And I get it. All this nonviolence and all this bullshit and all this. Stop falling for that shit. Sisters, stop disarming yourselves. Women are so accustomed to being at a disadvantage that's where they dwell in that headspace. That's not cool. Stop giving up your weapons. If you don't believe in having a gun, cool, but don't take other people's rights away.
Hey, so I want to bring up something that you were talking about earlier. So the NRA, the National Rifle Association, they officially chartered a group of black members, and they called them the Black Armed Guard. But this was started by black GIs that came home to a racist North Carolina after the war, and they were having problems in Monroe. And after hearing rumors that the Klan had intended to attack the NAACP local chapter, well, there was a group of black people that were armed, and this black armed guard surrounded the doctor's house with sandbags and showed up with rifles. Yeah. So they got into a pitched gun battle with the KKK. And they let them know that we are not going away, and you're going to have to deal with these bullets if you want to deal with us. So I brought that up to say that if you look at the history of blacks and guns in this country, it's mostly in response to protection.
Violence.
It's mostly in response to protection, and it's a small little blip in history that's related to gangs, and everybody wants to focus on that and don't realize that we have been handling guns for as long as we have been here, and most of that gun usage has been to protect ourselves from the overseers and their police groups rounding up runaway slaves, okay, and then the groups of white homesteaders in Nebraska, in Kansas, in Oklahoma, in Texas that were attempting to run black people off their land, okay, and then also, hang on, man, and then also to protect for black people to protect themselves from lynching in the South after World War One, after World War Two, okay, after the Korean War, all
After the
through that,
Civil
after
War,
Civil War as well, okay. So you have to understand that there is a long history of blacks taking up arms to protect themselves. But now, ladies and gentlemen, the KKK is no longer wearing robes and showing up in front of people's homes. They are hiding in the military. There is now a white supremacist element that has been exposed in the United States military and in law enforcement. They're in law enforcement as well. So this problem has not gone away. It is simply transformed. So if you look at the numbers of black people now getting guns in 2021, is jumped up significantly because black people have always had sense. And we realize that, okay,
what's going on.
we have to continue to protect ourselves. We have always protected ourselves. We will always protect ourselves.
Here's how the media has betrayed us, and here's something that you gotta make all black people understand. The media has betrayed you on several levels, of course, but the media always focuses on three big areas: California, LA, South Central LA, those places, Chicago gangs, and New York gangs. So they show this gang violence. So you got these three big cities with a lot of black folks, and they focus on them. But then they love to give that narrative for the entire country, even though you got cities in this country that don't have gang problems. But they love to show that because that sells, and violence sells. So they show these different things, and so everybody in the whole country is worried about gangs. Now it doesn't matter that you got white gangs. It doesn't matter that you got meth gangs. It doesn't matter that you have all this shit. You got fucking violence in South Dakota and these places with nothing but white folks. But so now we're scared of these street gangs, and so they always use these three places as what works in New York, even though the shit don't work in New York. Or what the gun? These three places have the biggest gun control in this nation, and that's what you key in on. But the fact is, that gun control doesn't work. People who are criminals don't care about what laws you produce. So it's already illegal to kill somebody. Why do you need more gun control? Just convict the motherfucker on the laws you got. If you shoot somebody and you ain't supposed to, that person should go to jail. And here's the part that you need to understand. How come a nigga dies during a traffic stop, but these mass shooters always make it to court? Because the mass shooters are usually white. So the white man, when they get there, like, hey, calm down, put your gun down. We know you killed 23 people, but let's talk. But
I'm going to shoot you in the leg like it did in Colorado.
The situation that took place, I try to use the local situations. And again, we talked about this before. In Omaha, Nebraska, and Bellevue is like a suburb of Omaha / another small city. You had two brothers. This happened the same week. You had a Hispanic kid shoot up Sonic Drive-In. He goes to Sonic. He shoots 5 people, kills 3. They apprehend him. They get him on the ground, handcuff him. He's even smiling at his mugshot. You got 2 brothers that get shot. In North Omaha, that's where the black people live, if you hadn't figured out. So you got these 2 brothers, traffic stop. The cop said they're both going for the same gun, shoots one of them. Like, how the hell do you have a traffic stop? You got somebody who you pull over, you have to shoot him, but then you got an actual person who's shooting and kill people, but you apprehend him. That's what happens when you don't look black. It's just when you're black, you have a built-in excuse to get murdered, and it's because it's white man fear.
It's a superiority complex.
My cousin that broke the shit down. Remember back in the late 80s and early 90s, they had a thing about niggas in motion, black man in motion. Any black man who is in motion is advancing on you. Talk about Michael Jordan going down the lane.
Yeah, running away. Even if you're running away, you're advancing.
Yeah, even if you're running away, they see you as being aggressive and advanced. I remember my cousin said this shit. I'm like, that's the dumbest shit I ever heard. Now that I'm grown, like, God damn, that was some deep shit. And so your color alone has people afraid of you, and they have a built-in excuse because when they get in front of that jury, which was designed by white people, that jury will feel the exact same thing they feel and agree with them. That's how these people get off because, going back to Zimmerman, Jordan, the kid in Florida, when you sit there, when I look at these cases and I'm like, okay, that dude had a 10 millimeter. He fired into that kid's SUV because his music was too loud. But then you find out that he was drunk. He got mad because his own son had kicked him out the wedding and all this other shit. I'm like, well, first things first. Once you said the guy was drunk, it's illegal to have your concealed carry on you and be drunk. How come he wasn't? How come he didn't go to jail for that? In fact, I think South Carolina was the first place to say that you could have 2 drinks in your system if you have your concealed. They literally broke it down. These conversations are being had across the country, and black folks aren't privy to it because we're told that you don't need a gun. The reason the narrative of black folks and guns is what we're talking about is because people don't understand. People do understand. You don't understand that it was done this way on purpose. That you were designed to be a permanent victim, a eternal loser. You're designed to be subjugated, and that this country was designed for that on purpose. Instead, once you realize, like, I was already here. This country belonged to me first, and I have a right to argue and say all this different shit. But a gun means I can say in confidence that I'm going to live. That I get it. You guys want to kill me? Fine. I'm taking 3 of you with me. That's all. And that's how it's supposed to be. That's how we were raised. Sorry, I got on a tangent. Go ahead, bro.
No, I mean, look, you have to understand that this situation between us and guns is not as complex as people make it out to be. But you have to be cognizant of who is promoting weapons of disarmament. Seriously. Because many times these people who want to promote disarmament they don't have your best interest at heart. And if it is a pacifist black person, okay, that's fine. But many times they're parroting something that somebody white had told them that was actually a seed that was planted in their mind, and it's a Manchurian candidate situation, and that person doesn't realize it. Now, you can say that I am being paranoid if you want to, but it only means you haven't been paying attention for the past hour. And
no, past 45 years. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But seriously though, real talk is that really what we're saying here is that there is an entire history of us protecting ourselves. But what you really need to do is look around at your environment. Forget about everything we just said for a second and ask yourself several questions.
Look at your personal self.
So you gotta look around and assess your security needs at home, the security needs in your neighborhood and for your family, and ask yourself, or even in your vehicle when you travel, especially traveling interstate from state to state, and ask yourself, how safe am I within this vehicle? How safe am I when I travel over the road? What are the threats? And then the next question is, will somebody come to save me? And when help shows up, am I a suspect? Because if you're a suspect, that's a problem. That creates a layer of tension between you and law enforcement. So there are many things you can do to disarm them in dealing with you. First and foremost is to always remain level-headed, because emotions are not the way to behave in a heightened reality situation. Okay, number one. Number two is do some reading and research about guns. As a matter of fact, go to a gun range and you say, oh, I don't want to fire guns. Hey, get that pussy shit out your system right now. Get that pussy ass shit, because that will get you fucking killed. All right. Start with a small caliber. Go to a range and say, this is my first time here. I'd like something weak so I can get used to holding a weapon and firing and being accurate. That's the main thing, is being accurate with your weapon, or being accurate with the caliber that you're firing at that moment. Because as you go up in caliber, the recoil increases depending on how the pistol or the rifle is made. So you want to be aware of that. And then number two, exercise discipline with yourself. And I'm not just talking about emotional discipline. I'm talking about the discipline of, if you do buy a weapon, where it is in your vehicle. Become aware of all of the gun laws in your state or the surrounding states. So that if you do travel with a shotgun in your vehicle to another state, you'll be aware that, okay, I don't have to have a permit to own a shotgun rifle. I can actually carry that into another state without worrying about any problems from law enforcement by merely saying this is a rifle that I may be using for hunting, et cetera, et cetera. But again, you have, that's fine, but you still have to familiarize yourself with the gun laws in the surrounding areas so that you can be armed with information. Because another thing, do not be intimidated, black people. Don't be intimidated by any person trying to tell you what your rights are, and they can't do that if you already know your rights.
Black folks, we tend to think that everything is illegal, and we've been bred to that on purpose. When it comes to when I was on my gun ownership journey, when I became an adult, I come back from college, I get my own place, and I had already told myself I wanted a gun, I get one. And I remember talking to the preacher at my church, the one I grew up with. He's still alive. He's in his 90s, whatever. And I remember, but he wasn't that old at the time. But you were talking to him, and I'm thinking that he's going to tell me I don't need one. And he recognized me as a man. He never said that. He was like, "No, I don't believe in having a gun. I don't need a gun for me, but I believe in everybody having one." And he tells you these stories. He says, I remember when one of our deacons was working on his car, and these kids show up, start talking to him, and one of them go, "Hey man, let's get out of here. He has a gun." Those kids were there to rob him. He's working on this car. But they saw that 45 or they 44, and they're like, nope, we'll pick a different target. So that just these little stories here and there, and this from Pastor Dr. McPherson, and when he's explained that to you, and I'm the one that introduced his sons to guns, and things like that. When you see that people, once you realize that people respect you as a man or a woman, and that they don't question your decision to have one, anybody who questions you sometimes, that is a form of bullying. They're trying to bully you out of, like, I was at my sister's house, and all these all these women were there because they were there from Sunday. It was church, and I was like, I got a gun. First thing they you don't need a gun, you don't need this, that. I'm like, okay. So I offered to take this old black woman to the gun range and said, "You want to go shoot my AR?" She said, "Baby, I would like that." When you when you come to them as an adult, the whole vibe changes. And that's one of these things that people don't understand, is that this was by design. You were designed or told to be scared of guns, and you don't need them. Truth be told, you need them. And that people who respect you, when you see that respect happen in a small situation in your own home or in your relative's home, can you imagine what it's like in the bigger world? You dig what I'm saying? Can you imagine what it's like in society, in the country of America, when you're armed and you're black? It's about respect, y'all.
Yes, without a doubt. But it's about respect, but it's about many other things. But arming yourself information is the most important. And do more reading about our history and guns. And by all means, pick up Nat Love's autobiography. You'll find it a thoroughly entertaining read. Thoroughly entertaining. So go and get that book, but also crack some of the other books and learn about how that the Black Panthers introduced gun ownership again to the urban populations of Black America in the 60s and 70s, and the effect that it had on the Negro psyche. Learn about people in Black history that were just larger than life, the gunslingers or the vets that came back, like Williams, the guy I'm talking about, and how they created the Black Armed Guard. But you'll find things you like, and you'll find some that you gravitate towards. But the point is, do some research of your own and ask these questions. Do I need a gun? Do I need some form of protection? Of course you do. But again, if you have lived through the year 2020, you see that chaos can spin and blossom at a moment's notice, and it can spread and keep spreading, and your stability, which you cherish so much, can evaporate. And what do you do in that scenario? Okay? So, all I'm saying is arm yourself. Arm yourself with information, and if you need be, damn it, arm yourself with a rifle or a pistol to protect your family. All right? That's all I got. We out. Peace.
Hey, remember, self education is self love. Holla back.